This talk, is a talk about cyclicality, symmetry, and duality. The cosmos is all that ever was, all that ever is, and all that ever will be. 14 billion years ago, a point of energy rapidly began to expand, forming space and time. As space and time and its fabric expanded, matter was formed inside of the furnaces of stars, which then died, spewing out their elements across the cosmos. Matter began to clump together in swirling clouds, which began to form planets and solar systems. And 4.5 billion years ago, our own planet Earth was formed. At first, the Earth was hot and fiery and inhospitable to life, but the Earth began to cool. And on the Earth, molecules began to clump together and formed single-celled life forms. Some of these single-celled life forms began to predate on other single-celled life forms. And in response, cells began to clump together, protecting themselves in a web of collagen, forming a cell wall. Thus, the race of life begun. Then, the Cambrian explosion, in which a multitude of life forms emerged, setting the stage for the insects and the vertebrates. And soon after, fish began to crawl onto land and evolve into amniotes, from whereupon our lineage is descended, as well as the reptiles and the mammals and the birds, and that one branch of life that was very successful, the dinosaurs. So that's the story of our world, and that point in space, it's an intriguing question, like what lies beyond? From where did that thing emerge? And a lot of scientists, they ask the question, why is mathematics such a powerful language to describe the modern world? To describe the physical world, not the modern world. So there's a quote by Galileo. He says, "The book of nature is written in the language of mathematics." And the most reasonable answer is because the physical world has a mathematical structure. The reality has an underlying structure. That this structure is somehow mathematical. Now, you've all heard of Plato's cave, but have you heard of Plato's rave in Plato's cave? But there's something intriguing about the point beyond. Like when in space there are black holes, and like when you pass beyond that lies something else. The kind of singularity, or the event horizon where we cross into the abstract realm. So in some sense, we can say that reality possesses a geometric hyperstructure. And there is the causality, that the flow of time, it's imprinted onto this geometric structure, which, space-time is a kind of fabric that hangs on top of this thing. And so when people talk about magic, magic is the practice of ritual to manifest supernatural forces. So this hyperstructure, which lies beyond, is by definition supernatural. And mathematics is often described as the language of nature. And when we do cryptography, we make use of mathematical laws to create protocols that embody specific properties. Often we use algebra, but not always algebra. For example, lattice-based cryptography uses a lot of analytic arguments. But basically, mathematics has certain properties. These properties encode the geometry of space, of the universe itself, and cryptography reaches down into that wellspring of mathematical principle or rules or principles, and uses their properties to create or to program certain protocols. So we kind of leverage mathematics. And so therefore, when we are doing crypto-anarchy, we are invoking the supernatural power of nature in self-defense of society. And so in this talk, I am going to call on Thoth, the moon god, to lend us his power. Assange says the universe smiles upon encryption. And cryptography is tapping into this hyperstructure. It's a supernatural power. And therefore, cryptography is God power. So when, for example, DarkFi, we are doing cryptography, we are tapping into this eternal God energy to lend us strength in our cause. Cryptography is spiritual work. And the fascinating thing is that symmetry and duality abound throughout nature. So, for example, the geometry of the torus is a sacred geometry. It's found all throughout nature. For example, a tree which starts from a seed, it grows a trunk and it grows its roots, and the roots spread out and the trunk grows up and it forms a canopy. There's a looping around which kind of reflects or mirrors the human nervous system. And even our galaxy itself. The galaxy is a toroidal shape. It's often presented as a disk, but there is a center through which energy sprouts from the top and the bottom, forming the toroidal cloud around the galaxy, the galactic halo. And even scientists speculate, or cosmologists, the structure of the cosmos is a torus itself, and atoms are enveloped in a toroidal magnetic field. What's interesting is that elliptic curves are isomorphic to a torus. If you form a complex, if you take the complex plane and you modulus it with a lattice, then if you imagine that you have a lattice, each square is one section of this lattice. If you modulo the lattice, you get a plane which wraps around in one direction and wraps around in another direction, forming a torus. And then using something called a Weierstrass P function, there's an isomorphism with an elliptic curve. So essentially, these shapes are the same shape. And the elliptic curve is a shape that's slightly complicated, but not too complicated. You start with a linear equation in x, then maybe you add two variables, you have x and y, and then, the next layer of complexity up is quadratic equations, x squared, maybe x squared and y squared, and then cubic equations, x cubed. But then the next layer of complexity is y squared and x cubed. And that's kind of like where in mathematics we kind of cross a threshold where things before that are trivial and relatively simple, like what we call solvable. And then things beyond that become vastly more complex. And elliptic curves lie on that kind of threshold. And what makes them so interesting is many other problems that lie in that more complicated space, under certain conditions, can be collapsed down to the elliptic curves. And so we can use the elliptic curves to solve problems. We can like project problems down onto them. And that's why they're ubiquitous throughout many areas of math, in number theory, in cryptography, in algebraic geometry, etc. So there is something very deep and fundamental about all these, about the geometries that we use in cryptography. Rome's glory shone for 1,000 years, but nothing lasts forever. In the 3rd century AD, civil war engulfed the empire. Chaos and corruption undermined it from within. And from every direction, its enemies gathered for the kill. Panic spread as terrified Romans sensed the apocalypse was at hand. Civilizations don't end and don't start and end on a certain date, but they do end with a cycle of about 300 years. And there are certain factors associated with the fall of every empire. For example, an undisciplined and overextended military. For example, like as we saw with the US in Guantanamo, where they were making pictures of the prisoners that they were keeping. Conspicuous displays of wealth, the old values of modesty are lost, and flaunting your wealth becomes fashionable. A massive disparity between rich and poor. Corruption in the system means that working people are fleeced. A desire to live off of a bloated state. In Rome, they had an extensive welfare system where people were basically dependent on grain handouts from the state. And, we have a very similar situation today. Obsession with sex, like people lose interests in any other goals and turn inwards just into, things that are immediately gratifying. Bread and circuses. In the 1000th anniversary of Rome, they held the biggest gladiator game under Severus, where 1,000 gladiators were killed and 500 different exotic animals in one gladiator game. For the 1000th anniversary of Rome, 1,000 gladiators were killed and 500 exotic animals. And we see that, and we see today the media is reaching new heights or new dizzying heights of spectacle with special effects and but the meaning becomes lost. And lastly, the most famous of all is the debasement of currency. Where the currency becomes worthless because it's debased. And we all feel, anybody I speak to, this is ubiquitous, that in the next 5 years, there is going to be a major macroeconomic or political event of great significance. You can talk to anybody, and everybody feels this deep down. And when collectively everybody starts saying that something is going to happen or feeling that something is going to happen, it's in fact that we're manifesting it in the same way that if you look in the 90s, there were many movies in which that 90s civilization which had peaked, everybody was like talking about the end of civilization. There were these movies that were desiring the destruction of civilization, and even movies where the Twin Towers were destroyed. And then what happened was that fiction passed into reality, and it became real. And there's a certain way of, and now, well, you know, if we look, for example, all the sci-fi, you know, I watch too much sci-fi, and if you look at the older sci-fi, it's very optimistic, whereas the sci-fi now, it's all very apocalyptic, very somber, and that is a signal of what people are collectively feeling is penetrating into the psyche, which means that this order, this decaying sensate order, is on the way out. So Satoshi, we can win a major battle in the arms race and gain a new territory of freedom for several years. So upon their decaying order, we can thrive, we can take root, and we can plant a flag for the next coming era. So from the ashes emerges a new order. And the DarkFi is enabling Agorist technology. And why we will prosper where they will fail is because we are pure and they are corrupt. And cryptography fundamentally alters the logic of violence. The logic of violence, which is predicated on which means that states can use violence to extract wealth from the populace in the form of taxes and enforced usage of fiat currency. Now we have an asset that is completely liquid and can be sent from any place to any other place in the world, immune to seizure, censorship, even completely anonymous in the fact that they cannot see the balance, they cannot see who you are transacting with. And peer-to-peer networks, this quote is part of a bigger quote by Satoshi in which he talks about how peer-to-peer networks are very good at routing around censorship. Wherever a censor exists, peer-to-peer network flows like water around that censorship. And so essentially what cyber money does is render state extortion obsolete. Their business model is basically obsolete. And coercive state violence versus is very hard for them to tax decentralized networks. The decentralized network is a dispersed system which is parallel. It's immediate. It responds to concerns. It's a dynamic organism versus the industrial linear processes that are sequential. And even, you know, we can employ cyber agents, ephemeral agents that exist in cyberspace that even when we die, they continue to operate our will. We welcome the herald of a new age and the rise of the cypherpunk methodology. So DarkFi is an L1 for anonymous applications, and essentially algorithmic money is far superior to fiat money, and cypherpunk methodology is superior to state methodology. The police move at the speed of law. We move at the speed of light. Code is better than law. And modern crypto is a superpower. You know, many of you have heard of ZK proofs. A ZK proof, like if before, when we used to want to do cryptography, you know, we'd have to go, okay, we want to construct this schema. Okay, what are the tools and techniques available to us? And you'd have to know the math behind them. And you had to try and think how you can piece them together to construct a schema that enables you to do some kind of protocol or some kind of operation. And that was difficult, and it wasn't always possible. And sometimes the algorithms you'd make, they would be suboptimal, they would be slow. But now with ZK proofs, the developer has a generic tool set for which they can solve a whole range of problems extremely easily. And it not only that, it opens the door to an entirely new design space, which wasn't before possible, where we can create markets, we can create information markets, places to buy and sell goods, buy and sell currency, many things, all completely anonymous, futures markets, and so on. And not only do we have ZK proofs, we also have multi-party computation that if I'm not online and I'm not there to construct a proof, but a proof still needs to be constructed, that a group of servers can all have a partial share of that secret, but none of them knowing what the secrets are, and working together to compute algorithms, to compute functions. And also we have now homomorphic encryption, which is even more fantastical, even more sci-fi, where you encrypt values, you put them, into some kind of database. Nobody can see the values, but people can compute functions on those. And even those functions can be like, okay, compute this algorithm, and if it meets a certain condition, generate a result that is sent to this public key, or even publicly decrypted. And that's just the algorithms I told you about, because there is a whole new realm or boundary that's being pushed into, because right now a lot of the cryptography uses very simple results from rings and finite fields, but beyond that is the very high-level math, for which we've only just begun to start to mine, in which you have higher dimensional varieties and all kinds of class groups and very exotic primitives that gives us even more superpowers. So it's now an accelerative process where it's such a breakneck technological development that we will win. And so DarkFi is enabling this vision of cryptography, of cryptocurrency. So I can show some example of creating some of our ZK tooling. So, wait, wrong screen. Okay, so here is the DarkFi directory, and we have a ZK compiler. So here is so if I, for example, I run, so wait, let me show you here. So this is just like a source file for a ZK circuit, which it takes in these witness values, and basically this file is just a collection of different opcodes that we have. For here we're computing a value commitment or a Pedersen commitment using elliptic curves. And then, here we're witnessing some values. We're doing a hash function. We're doing range checks, less than checks, Merkle trees for set inclusion, and you can also do set exclusion, Boolean checks, etc. It's just a kind of test. And when I want to run it, I can run this tool, and like that. And it generates that file, which I can use that file inside of my smart contracts. I can load it and I can generate proofs, etc. And even if I want to interactively see what is happening inside of the virtual machine, this is an interactive viewer, and it's showing, okay, adding these values to the heap, and then it shows me what the heap is at the conclusion of the instruction, and you can see it goes like this. So for etc, it's quite okay. Come on, okay, and then because we have Python bindings, you can see this. You see this tool. It's only 180 lines of code, and it's just like a little kind of utility that you can use to construct ZK proofs and verify them. Like normally you'll do that inside of your smart contract, but if I run it, so I can do, I have this JSON file with the witness values that I want it to use in my proof. So then I run like this. So -w, And then, okay, let's make a proof. And then also I'll do a debug trace so we can actually see the values, the intermediate values that will be computed during the proof. So if I run that, so you can see it's building the proving key. And then now the verifying key. And then now it's doing the actual proof. And then there you go. That's the intermediate values, the hex values for each of those points. And on the left is the instructions. And then these values on the right are the return values from those instructions. So you can see the lines where it's void are the lines where like nothing is returned essentially. So let's. Okay, and so also within DarkFi, like many projects, they go, oh, we're a privacy project, and they're like, okay, let's go into their chat, and they're using Discord, and they're putting their docs on Google Docs, and they're hypocrites. In DarkFi, we don't even want to run any centralized infrastructure at all. We certainly don't want to depend on other people's centralized infrastructure. So that means to live up to that, we've had to make our own issue tracker. We made our own command line, peer-to-peer, anonymous issue tracker for tracking the tasks, and also our own chat system. So I'll quickly show you the chat system, which is built on top of our peer-to-peer network. So, you know, I will make a UI for the phone, but for now, how it works is you run a node. And so let's see how it works on this internet. And so, okay, the node has just seeded itself. Okay, and now it's connecting to the network. And so then we go here. Okay, I'll make this full screen. Go to WeChat. And if I go here, you see now I'm in the chat. I can talk with people inside of there. And so it's that simple. And we use it every Monday. We have our meeting in #dev. On our chat, that's where our dev team organizes, and our nascent community is on there. And you know, we want to migrate all of our infrastructure into peer-to-peer, even the Git, even the code. We're going to eventually leave GitHub because GitHub's a liability because it's owned by Microsoft and they censor people. And then if you go to the DarkFi website and, you know, you go to the docs, and you see here is the testnet guide. And in the testnet guide, you can see anonymous payments, you can do swaps, OTC stuff. And then also, we have anonymous DAOs. So some of you may have seen it last year, but basically you can create a DAO, you can create a governance token. The DAO has a treasury, you can put money in the treasury, you know, then the owners of the governance token can collectively manage those funds. So then inside of DarkFi, okay, we have a blockchain. We also have a DHT we have a DHT, that's the geode there. And then also we have a DAG. So a DAG is kind of like a blockchain. There's ordering, but it's less strict. And so we use that DAG for the chat so that when you log in, you have the history, and we use it for the tasks system as well. And then I'll show you some new things that's upcoming, which, you know, I was going to show in this presentation, but didn't have ready in time, but it's there. One is dark pools. So a dark pool is this is the prototype of it. So a dark pool is you put money in to a pool and people can anonymously take money out of the pool and nobody knows how much money is in the pool and nobody can see the trades that are ongoing. So then, and then also there's an escrow system. So, you know, I run this Sage script. So if I show here actually, so I'm not going to do all these commands now, but I will eventually make this easier for people to use. But you can see I'll just show one of the commands. So this is one person generating their shares for a 2 or 3 escrow, and then people operate the tool with the keys. You just use the normal payment system, and you can have escrow. And then also, I mentioned we have the DAG on which we built the chat and the tasks. And then on top of that, I will also build a system for people to leave reviews and review other vendors. And so if we put some of these tools together, like I mentioned, there was a DHT. What can you do with a DHT? You can put web pages in a DHT. You can put directory listings in a DHT network and fetch that data out. We have payments, completely anonymous payments. We have escrow system. I just showed you the escrow tool. So you can have an escrow to resolve disputes. And then lastly, also I just talked about the review system. You put all of that together, you get a decentralized anonymous marketplace, one that cannot be censored, a marketplace where people can buy and sell any goods online, and they can also do currency, they can do anything. So that, for some reason, isn't a thing yet. So back to philosophy. Oh, and I forgot to show this cool picture, which took us an entire day to make. So just admire it for a second. It's beautiful. Oh yeah, and I forgot this slide. I was talking about all of that. Okay, forgot my slides. Oh, and I forgot about that slide as well. So that's the architecture. I guess it would have been more entertaining if I was going, oh, and this is the peer-to-peer network, and you can see the IRCD and the DarkFi node and the anonymous DAO and SDK and contracts and blockchain engine. Okay. Okay, yeah, sure thing. I'll put the slides out. Okay, and these are some of the products. You can see I showed you the chat. There's the task manager with the tasks running. There's OTC, so doing Tracy, join 2 transactions, inspect a transaction, sign it. The DAO, you see create a DAO, view the DAO, list the DAOs, make a proposal, list the proposals, vote, execute a successful DAO vote. And this is just a network debugging tool. So you can see the nodes you're connected to, and you can look at them, and you can see their traffic. This is a DarkFi node. This is the wallet, send and receive, and that's the compiler that I showed you earlier, the ZK compiler. Okay, and these are the products I was talking about. So dark pools, escrow reviews. Okay. So I've sometimes heard people go, evolution, not revolution, man. The thing is, that is a mischaracterization of evolution. When paleontologists look in the fossil record, evolution is not this this entire population, all the population gradually going towards an optimum. Actually, evolution is speciation. Populations spontaneously divide, they get geographically separated, or there's genetic drift for other reasons, and those populations then compete with each other. One of them goes extinct, or they specialize in different directions. And in the fossil record, what the paleontologists see is that there might be 100,000 years of very rapid change, followed by a very long period, 5 million years, of stasis, because when you have a complex system, the complex system it's building. Imagine you have a pile of rice, and you're dropping the rice one by one, and it builds. Or even better example, snow on a mountain. The snow builds, and it builds, and the system becomes more complex. The ecosystem, it's growing, and it reaches this terminal point, what we call the tipping point. And then the snowboarder comes along the mountain and he crosses, and the snow is just light, but it's so much of it hanging, and it took just that little that guy going across, and it all collapses. And then what happens is the ecosystem suddenly, like imagine tectonic plates. When there's an earthquake, the plates, they're like pushing against each other, and then there's friction, and then suddenly they move, and at which point cascade happens, and the cascade leads to more change. And then during that period, new niches are opened up, and there's a race to occupy those niches and for a new order to emerge. So a new emergent order. And so evolution is actually punctuated. Like, you can actually look that up on Wikipedia, and you'll see punctuate equilibrium. And that diagram is a diagram of punctuate equilibria. So as the mistruth that we're taught in high school is that evolution is like this smooth tree. But actually, when you look at the fossil record, it's more like, okay, there's this like stable ecosystem, and then bam, there's this quick period of change before a new order emerges, and then continues. So, and human evolution is a very good example of that, where we had you had Homo rhodensiensis and Homo antecessor, and both of these, and also at the same time coexisting was Homo erectus. And these species are existing for several 100,000 years, even 500,000 years, and different species of humans, where then when we look at the fossil record, we're like, oh, okay, it's almost like this new species of human just spontaneously emerged or very quickly emerged. So human evolution is a very good example of that, and there is a certain adaptability within evolution. So, for example, cats throughout the Pleistocene were very specialist, but something about their genetics enabled them to very easily adapt, or to very easily evolve for different specialist niches, whereas dogs were typically remained very generalist, but evolved very slowly. So it's two different strategies, and part of that is how our DNA works, where inside of our DNA there are components, kind of like modules that pre-exist, and these components can be switched on and off, and each of these components encodes kind of features, and these features may be latent inside of your DNA, but under the right conditions, they become activated. So certain types of species are more prehensive or more prone to some certain evolutionary forms than others. And so DarkFi is something that will have to unfurl like watering a plant, where there's mini revolutions that happen that adapt. It's not like there's like one logic where it's set and it goes towards the end. There will have to be shifts in strategy that occur along the way, and how the kind of movement is set up to be able to adapt or to take into account those shifts that happen will lend it its success. And hence, therefore, unlike other projects which try to populate themselves with slaves and copy the logic of the state, we encourage leaders, power, and struggle. That's the thing that creates wealth. And so this principle of duality and symmetry and duality that occurs all throughout nature, I want to go through a proof with you of duality. It's so fundamental to mathematics that it finds itself everywhere. But here is a very simple geometric proof of duality, which is take any statement about points and lines. You know, I can give you an example. For example, where is it? Where's my? So I don't know. There's Pappus theorem. There's Descartes' theorem. So let's see if this loads. So if you go, okay, which one of these is it? I think it's the hexagon. So if you go on Wikipedia and you look up any kind of proof, where is it? Oh, here's the contents. So if you look up any kind of geometric proof about lines and points, you'll see this section called dual theorem. And basically it means that there is a theorem about points and lines, but you can actually do something to that theorem to obtain a new theorem. So it's like a meta theorem. And that's called the dual of the theorem. So for example, here's another one. And actually what's interesting, okay, so this theorem is actually dual to itself. So you obtain the same theorem from its dual. But what's interesting is that well, I'll give the proof. So let P denote any statement about points and lines. And then P bar is the dual statement where you just take the text of that statement. You take the words. And wherever you see the word line, you replace it with point. Wherever you see the word point, you replace it with line. You just swap them around. So for example, here's an example of two theorems, or two statements, sorry. Which are both dual to each other. So through two distinct points, Q1 and Q2, so you take any 2 points, there will always be a unique line that passes through them. So there will be no other line that passes through them, just that line. So a line is defined by 2 points. So the dual of that is that two distinct lines always intersect in 1 point. So I can show that they're dual. So for example, if I take, so on the left is the statement P. So if I take f of x of a point, you can see it's equal to ax plus by plus cz. And we can represent that in a manner of speaking as a tuple, like you have a tuple in Python or Rust. So we call that tuple ABC. And there is a point, which is a 0 on that line. So UVW, so that's also a tuple. So when we take that f, we evaluate it on the point. As we said, that's a 0 of that line, so it's equal to 0, which, if I write it out fully, means that AU plus BV plus CW is equal to 0. So that is the first statement. And to obtain the dual, what we do is we take P, and instead of P being a point, now P is a function. So how do we change P into a function? Well, we said that one way of representing functions is as a tuple of 3 things. So now this tuple is UVW. And if we look at G is this tuple UVW, but we could also write as a function UX plus VY plus WZ. And now the function F, which was the tuple ABC, is actually a point. So it becomes Q. So what happens when we evaluate G at Q? Well, let's put it in and find out. Okay, so we have G is equal to UX plus VY plus WZ. And when we put in this point ABC, what do we get? UA plus VB plus WC, which if we look on the left, we actually saw was equal to 0. So this is equal to 0 because it's a commutative. Well, anyway, they're both equal to 0. So we just proved that you can obtain this dual theorem through this process. And so I'm going to, let's look at the definition of civilization on Wikipedia. And if some of you saw the quote on the HCPP website, it's a reference to this. So this is just the lead of Wikipedia. So civilizations are organized in densely populated settlements divided into hierarchical social classes with a ruling elite and subordinate urban and rural populations which engage in intensive agriculture, mining, small-scale manufacture and trade. Civilization concentrates power, extending human control over the rest of nature, including over other human beings. So that is a struggle that has been going on since before 5,000 years, free society and state civilization. It's not a linear progression from freedom to oppression. It's a constant struggle with swings and reversions both ways. And, you know, there is this concept of first and second nature. And this duality is something that's so fundamental to nature. And you know, there is a struggle between the previously creative but now outworn sensate order and the new emerging creative idealistic forces in all fields of social and cultural life. Every important aspect of Western social life is in crisis. Its body and mind are ill. We are between two epochs, the dying sensate culture of a magnificent yesterday and the coming idealistic culture of a creative tomorrow. The rays of sun still illuminate the glory of the passing epoch, but the light is fading. And in the deepening shadows, it becomes more and more difficult to see clearly in the confusion of twilight. The night of transitory period stands before us with its nightmares, shadows, and horrors. Beyond it lies the great dawn of a culture waiting to greet the men of the future. Let there be dark.
Hi, thank you, Amir, for a truly thought-provoking talk, immensely entertaining. So thank you very much. To follow up to this slide and to ask a more of a visual-based question, right? It's like for those that are old enough of us who remember, for example, Prodigy, there was a 1992 album, Music for the Jilted Generation, that also presented a very similar image, right? It was the destroyed world on the right, a bridge in the middle, and a bunch of ravers on the left, surging towards the future. This is also Dante's Alighieri.
Overlooked by McAfee.
Yes, yes.
In heaven.
You're presenting the second Jerusalem from the scripture. You're presenting Dante Alighieri's.
Sergei he betray.
Yeah, it's all there. So the question is, to get to the question is, to what extent do you think this presents the eternal hope of embetterment of man? And to what extent do you think this is actually realizable? It's a tough question, but
you're saying how realizable is revolution?
And in any way you choose to interpret that.
I mean, I assume that's your question.
Yes.
Or, I think if we want to, it's not a question of if it's realizable or not. It's like, what else are you going to do with your life? You know, like obviously you're going to do great things. So we have to band together and become as powerful as we can be. How do we do that? We strategize and we organize and we mobilize and we accumulate resources. That's how all the change happened throughout history. So I don't think it's unobtainable. It's like the cycle of life. And, you know, as we all know, this order is on the decline and will collapse. And who will take over?